Welcome back to the Story of Liberty. I'm your host, John Bona. With me are Jennifer Featherstone and Dan Williamson. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Lady.
Hello, John.
We're talking about abortion and the upcoming elections right around the corner. You know, some of the objections I always hear that people have raised against the idea of prohibiting abortion. In fact, we were talking about that in the car on the way over, the three of us. You know, some people will say, well, you know, I'm personally opposed to abortion. But I think that's a decision that should be left up to the mother and her doctor. And we hear that a lot. You know, for example, our current vice president, Joe Biden, he's repeatedly said, you know, my position is that I'm opposed to abortion, but I don't think I have the right to impose my view on the rest of society. Well, John Kerry said the same thing in the 2004 presidential election, that he didn't want abortion, that he was actually personally opposed to it. But he said he couldn't legislate morality. That was the term he used. But because we believe in the privacy and equality of women, he you know, Obama said, you know, and you can look at this right on their website, that they say they stand proudly for a woman's right to choose. That's right on the White House website. Check it out. And, you know, they use the words consistent with Roe v. Wade. And they also go on to say that we firmly stand against the Republican efforts to undermine that right. That's on the current White House website. You know, the real question is not liberty in the abstract, freedom in the abstract, but what the appropriate restrictions the law should place on individual liberty. Look at, if the preborn child, unborn child, is considered a human person, I think we've proven that. We could spend all week doing this. But the question is, should the government allow people to commit murder against their own children? And certainly it should not.
Now that we're heading into election season, we need to think about the fact that 50 million babies have been murdered through abortion. And we need to look at the candidates' viewpoints on these. And we're going to listen to a clip now by one of our candidates running, Ron Paul.
This whole notion of life not being valuable just is something I was never able to accept. I happened to have walked into an operating room where they were doing an abortion on a late pregnancy. They lifted out a small baby that was able to cry and breathe, and they put in a little bucket and put it in the corner of the room and pretended it wasn't there. I walked down the hallway, and a baby was born early, slightly bigger than the baby that they just put in a bucket. They wanted to save this baby. So they might have had 10 doctors in there doing everything conceivable. Who are we to decide that we pick and throw one away and pick up and struggle to save the other ones? Unless we resolve this and understand that life is precious and we must protect life, we can't protect liberty.
Wow, Dan, that was Ron Paul.
Well, you know, Republican or Democrat aside, Ron Paul has been consistent his whole life supporting the issue of life at conception. And being the strong constitutional supporter that he is absolutely right on. If we don't define this issue as life at conception, and that a human being begins at conception, which I think has been reasonably proven in our medical world and also biblically and theologically, if we don't take this to the finish line in the elections that are coming up, we will have missed the point. If life, in fact, begins at conception, then we are admitting as a nation that when we support abortion, we support murder. And if we support murder, the question is then who can murder whom? Because we've decided that man is, in fact, the arbitrator of these things. And as nations slide into fascism, we have seen the diabolical nature of that core decision. Adolf Hitler decided that certain groups of people were not human and thus not viable, and millions died. We have to come to grips with the fact that babies are human beings at conception. That means that life has to be protected and maintained, regardless of our predisposition and our own personal problems, and that life needs to be brought to fruition at birth, and not one in a garbage can, which is crying, and another being saved in another room. If that isn't a postmodernist humanist doctrine, I don't know what is, where everything is relative. The truth in one room is different than the truth in another. There has to be transcendent truths that do not change. And I give Ron Pauls a lot of credit for being consistent year after year after year, not wavering on this issue. Life begins at conception. All life is valuable. The Constitution says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If you do not have life, you do not have liberty. How can you possibly pursue happiness? It really is a linchpin issue, and every candidate has to be held accountable on this issue. And I give Ron Pauls a strong A vote on this because he just has been consistent since day one.
You know, I'm just looking here at Ron Paul's voting record, and obviously it's very long. He's been in politics for quite a while, and he's never voted on any amendment or any bill in any way of support of abortion. And one of the things we have to look at also with the candidates is realistically, politically, how they're going to apply these personal views. And in my opinion, Paul and Gingrich, even though Gingrich doesn't have a 100% record, it's better than most of the other candidates on abortion. Those two candidates have the best political way of implementing this. Paul wants to take it back as a state issue. He thinks the reason we have this problem is because we're nationalizing state issues. You know, Roe versus Wade became a national issue. He wants to repeal Roe versus Wade and then put the rights back to the states. Gingrich pretty much wants to do the same thing, except he wants to do it a different method. He wants to take an interpretation of the 14th Amendment. Congress shall define personhood and get Congress to pass a personhood act that we start at conception. Those are the way those two candidates are going to do it. The rest of them pretty much look at it as we can't legislate morality. They said if a bill comes to their desk, they will sign it, but they're not going to push it. You can just tell by reading their interviews and listening to their interviews, they're not very passionate, except for Bachmann. You know, Bachmann is another candidate that's really, really up there with a high record of anti-abortion issues. And we're going to listen to a clip by Bachmann right now.
There's a sweet sorrow, if you will, regarding this subject, because we're talking about something that is dealing with the foundational nature of this country and yet of all humanity, and that's life and what we'll do with life. And I jotted down just a few words before I came up to manage this hour, and I wrote down that every generation, Mr. Speaker, seems to grapple with an issue that transcends all others. That issue for 31 years has been whether government will protect from destruction life, innocent human life. We have lost 50 million fellow Americans. And now we've lost the children, some of whom those 50 million would have borne. There are 50 million women whose bodies were violated by the horrific violence that we call here in this chamber abortion. There are 50 million men who have lost out on the tremendous privilege and joy of fatherhood. And our nation today is poor because we're missing, Mr. Speaker, 50 million fellow Americans, so sadly.
That was Michelle Bachmann, very well said, presidential candidate for the Republican Party. You know, we hear politicians so many times, she's so different. You know, we hear so many politicians say, you know, I'm personally against abortion, but I just don't support laws against abortion. You know, this argument is made by so many politicians that seem to be supporting the idea of not wanting to kill preborn children. But when it comes down to the actual issue, they want a legal right for women to have an abortion. That's the bottom line. I don't know who they're fooling. They're not fooling anybody, really. But see, this argument fails to understand the difference between personal, moral issues and government laws. If we really believe that an action of taking innocent human life is wrong, we're not going to be content with depending on the moral influence any of us have to stop it. In other words, let me give you an example. It would be similar to saying this. I'm personally opposed to drunk driving, but I wouldn't personally recommend drunk driving. I'm opposed to it, but I wouldn't personally recommend it to anybody not to drunk drive. And I don't support laws against it. See, I wouldn't do it, but I wouldn't tell anybody else. Because I think it's an individual matter that each driver should have the right to decide for themselves whether to drive drunk or not. The same thing. Something's right or something's wrong. Think about it in terms of murder. I'm personally opposed to murder, right? But I don't think there should be any laws against murder. Well, that's the same argument these politicians are making. It's the same argument. I'm not personally opposed to abortion. I know it's murder in my heart. But I don't think there should be laws against abortion. We're going to play one more tape here of Newt Gingrich on the issue.
Well, I'm intrigued with something which Robbie George of Princeton has come up with, which is an interpretation of the 14th Amendment in which it says that Congress shall define personhood. That's very clearly in the 14th Amendment. And part of what I would like to explore is whether or not you could get the Congress to pass a law which simply says personhood begins at conception. And therefore, and you could in the same law block the court and just say this will not be subject to review, which we have precedent for.
That was Newt Gingrich, Dan.
Yep. Well, that's another approach that's out there, is to basically force people into a corner which says that, okay, we've passed an amendment that a child is a human being prior to its birth at the point of conception. And at that point, the nation has to come to grips with, then we are committing murder. Because that's what that would do. It would say that this is a viable human being, not that we really need to say that. God has already said that. But the point is we need Congress to put that legislation out. And then once that's passed, the nation has to come to grips that they are either accepting murder or they have to reject that behavior and end abortion because it's murder of a living human being, which would be in contradiction to the Constitution and the preamble to the Constitution, which is the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's an interesting approach. Of course, I think Jenna just said a little bit ago, there's these two approaches. One is a constitutional amendment to define life at conception, and one is to unravel it at the federal level and move it back to the state level. I'm not sure which way these candidates will take it in the end, but there'll probably be some interesting combination of both that will probably occur. Because the side that is pro-choice, as they use these great words, pro-choice, I don't remember the baby's choice being involved there, the pro-abortion groups, they're obviously going to fight back to stop either change. And that's why elections have consequences. And people out there that are planning not to vote have to realize that their votes are important and they need to be informed and understand that our nation is at a pivot point. And our position on life could come back to haunt us if, in fact, we don't change this pivotal issue. And actually, all three of those candidates, there's a passion in their voice that I just applaud, because this is a pivotal issue. Everything else may actually hover around this.
You know, Dan, Gallup poll conducted a poll, and it showed that the majority of Americans, I think it was 51%, the one they did in 2009, they called themselves pro-life. And it was a slim margin, and then only 40% they used the word pro-choice, were for abortion. So in reality, and then there's that other 10% that didn't answer, I guess, or in the middle. But so the reality is the majority of people in America, U.S. adults, have identified themselves now as pro-life. Now, that's good news. And look at, if America is going to have this national health care in place, or it'll be repealed, obviously it's going to the Supreme Court. I think it's actually called the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. Isn't that the real name for Obamacare?
I think that's correct.
But, Dan, this thing, Jenna, it's so highly partisan. Let's just be frank. Republicans strongly favor repeal. I mean, a large majority. And the Democrats, they want the law kept in place. But it's going to the Supreme Court rather than Congress. And you know what? Gallup poll said almost 70% of Americans want Obamacare repealed. And a lot of them want it repealed because abortion's in there. He tried to say by executive order, he actually signed something to keep it out. Baloney, it won't be out. Abortion's in there. A lot of states are already taking funds for it. Look at it, it's an issue of life versus death. And, Dan, you mentioned those two choices. The moral standards, the laws that's against abortions, there too, right? People should not be allowed to murder other people, right?
That's right.
But the other one that what the real argument has become, because nobody, the people that call themselves pro-choice don't go there, because how could you say you want somebody murdered? So their real argument is that the preborn child, the unborn child, should not be considered a human being, shouldn't be protected, and that Christians or people that are pro-life should not persuade others that an unborn child, a human person, is a human person and deserves all the legal protections that are due to human persons. That's their main argument, Jenna, isn't it?
The dehumanizing of a baby. That's their entire argument rests on that one statement. If they cannot dehumanize that baby, then they have to admit it's murder. So they will do everything in their power to dehumanize that baby to continue abortion. And, the thing that really, really just hurts me inside is that, and I think about this a lot, is every time I pay my taxes, I'm helping fund this. I mean, is that a sin? I've thought about this so many times because I'm paying my taxes, and my taxes are going to Planned Parenthood. My taxes are going to the funding of abortion. It's just so unethical. They're saying they can't legislate morality. Well, they are legislating morality. And it's not a morality I agree with. I don't believe as an American I should have to pay for somebody else's abortion. I don't believe I should have to support it with my tax dollars. The whole system it's all double talk. They can't legislate morality. Please, they are legislating it. Except in my view, it's a very evil form of morality.
Dan, that's right. I mean, no government money should be given to pay medical costs of abortion, especially Planned Parenthood. I mean, what did they get? $350 million last year. And you know what? Planned Parenthood on their own performed over 300,000 abortions with our money, like you said, Jenna. And you know what? They used that for the purpose of population control. It's one of their main arguments. The wrongful taking of a human life given by God.
The founder of Planned Parenthood was a bigoted racist. And her goal when she started Planned Parenthood was to wipe out the black community, the African-American community. That was her goal. And how the Democrats can support such an organization started on such anti-liberty standards is astounding to me. We're going to now listen to a clip by Herman Cain on his stance on abortion.
I support life from conception. No, people shouldn't be just free to abort, because if we don't protect the sanctity of life from conception, we will also start to play God relative to life at the end of life.
That was Herman Cain speaking about his view on abortion. So we need to look back at the foundations of Planned Parenthood because, it's just like I was saying before and Dan was saying before, is like the foundations of our country, without liberty, without protection of life, we can't move forward and have a viable society without tons of problems. And Planned Parenthood is one of those organizations that their basis and their foundation is basically evil. Even most recently, a pro-life group went in and has recordings. I'll post them on our website with the show on storyofliberty.net, where these people went into Planned Parenthood and they have them. These things are only 6 months old, them saying that they would allow donations just for the abortions of black babies, just for the abortions of African American and Spanish babies. It's a horribly corrupt institution.
And now we will play a clip of Elvita King on Planned Parenthood and the effects of that organization on the African American community.
And we think that the majority of the Planned Parenthood clinics are in minority communities. And after the African American and Latino communities, then certainly the college campuses are targeted, and it's so startling. The effort to defund Planned Parenthood is certainly helped by the work that Lila is doing. For instance, even some of Lila's early work leading into this most recent work, finding Planned Parenthood offices that would just say, we'll take money to kill black babies, and that cannot be denied. Or in this very recent expose, just don't tell us the truth. Let us show you how not to tell the truth so that we can continue to abort these babies. What happens in this instance, Planned Parenthood is doling out death, doling out pain. The dear mothers' bodies are being hurt. Women's bodies are being hurt. My uncle, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, the Negro cannot win if he's willing to spell the futures of his children for immediate personal comfort and safety. And so women, especially African-American women, Latino women, young women in high school and college are being coerced, fooled, tricked, and lied to by Planned Parenthood, the largest provider of abortion in this country. So I commend you, and I ask everyone on this webcast to be motivated, to be encouraged, to know that your prayers and your actions are definitely making a difference.
Well, when you hear people say things like, well, abortion's for birth control, population control, well, the problem is God said, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. The earth is not full. There's plenty of room for everybody to live. So Christians should not be fooled by the kind of terminology that comes out of these death machines or Planned Parenthood facilities. But there's also kind of a bigger commentary, and John, you were tapping on it, that, we have laws that prevent murder because murder affects other people, right? I mean, you hurt someone, or you steal a car, you affect someone. Well, when abortions are performed, they actually affect everybody because we do not know what we lost. We know we lost a human being, but we don't know what diseases they may have cured. We don't know what children may have been born from that man and woman that have been aborted. We have been affected as a whole culture. There's no way to recover that. It is lost permanently. And when people make that argument, well, who does it affect? It affects all of us. And yes, there are those measurable things, like I said, economics and GDP, gross domestic product. But the point is, it affects every one of us. And I was reading the Adonaic blessing in the Bible, and I thought to myself, how do Christians come to grips with these words? And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron his son, saying, this is the way you shall bless the children of Israel. Say to them, the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So they shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Abortions remove that ability to do that. We lose those children before we're ever able to say that prayer over them.
Folks, we're winding up tonight. It's critical that all Christians cast their vote for those most likely to govern our nation according to God's Word, God's stated laws and principles. If that is the standard we use to cast our vote, then no honest, sincere Christian could vote for anyone who believes a woman has a right to kill her baby. Life is a major theme of the Bible. And thank you for joining us this evening. Enjoy your life. Have a good week. God bless you.